What if a single unexpected connection could lead you to confront your deepest fears and rediscover love in the most surprising way? Welcome to Happiness of Love, your daily dose of K-dramas. Get ready to fall in love with unforgettable stories. Can you tell us where are you listening from? Mika Tanaka's world, meticulously structured like the precise lines of her graphic designs, soon spirals into chaos with a chilling notification from the hospital. The message is blunt and cold: Yuki Asano has passed away, and for reasons utterly foreign to her, she has been listed as his emergency contact. Staring at her phone, disbelief courses through her like ice water, a brief flicker of panic. She calls the hospital, her heart racing, demanding clarity, only to be met with the stark confirmation that her number is indeed on the record. A mixture of confusion and an unsettling sense of unease grips her. Was this a clerical error? Shouldn't someone else, a family member perhaps, be contacted instead? As the shock begins to morph into something deeper, she fights the urge to shrug off the situation, knowing the rational thing would be to ignore it entirely. Yet, the gnawing curiosity within her stirs an inexplicable sense of duty. Why did fate connect her to a stranger now resting quietly in a hospital morgue? After a quick change of clothes, one meant to blend in with her usual inconspicuous attire, Mika stands at the entrance of the hospital. The antiseptic smell hits her, mingling with echoes of distant beeping machines, companions to the whispers of hurried staff. With every step towards the administrative office, skepticism plagues her. What will she say? Why does it matter? But as she retrieves a small, nondescript box from the desk, Yuki's only remaining possessions, her heart races again, this time propelled by something more vulnerable. Inside the box, she finds a worn leather notebook, pages filled with mumbling sketches and scattered thoughts, an old cassette tape whose label has long since faded, and a single rusted key, inconspicuous but weighty with unsolved stories. The indifference of the staff around her serves only to amplify the gravity of the moment as they remind her that unclaimed bodies are rushed. The reluctance bubbling within her mingles with confusion. Why did she even care about the belongings of someone she never met? As she sits in her pristine apartment that night, the contents of the box lay bare before her like a puzzle begging to be solved. With the moonlight casting soft shadows across the room, she runs her fingers over the rough leather of the notebook, the texture a stark contrast to her sterile, organized life filled with crisp lines and neat graphs. Alone, she replays the phrase they had uttered at the hospital: unclaimed bodies, a truth steeped in loneliness, and she can't shake the feeling that, in some twisted way, Yuki's life flickers through the corners of her own, urging her to figure out what had gone wrong in his. The unfinished business pulls at her, as if the key hidden within the box doesn't just represent a lock without an entrance but the possibility of unlocking a world she had always avoided. The night stretches on, each tick of the clock drumming a reminder that her predictability is about to unravel, and for the first time, she feels a sense of disquickening anticipation, a feeling that maybe fate has a plan that extends beyond her perfectly drawn maps. Determined to return the items, Mika immerses herself in research about Yuki Asano, her fingers dancing over the keyboard as she scours social media and public records. Each click leads her to dead ends, unanswered questions swirling around in her mind like leaves caught in a gust of wind. It isn't until she stumbles upon an old address linked to Yuki that she feels a flicker of hope ignite within her. With a mix of anticipation and trepidation, she makes her way to the rundown apartment complex that bears the remnants of better days. The building stands there like a forgotten relic, its paint peeling and windows dimmed, each crack whispering stories of its past inhabitants. As she approaches, she notices the faded numbers on the door, beating like a small heart against the silence that envelopes her. Inside, she meets the landlord, an elderly man with a face etched in creases, who barely remembers Yuki. He describes Yuki in a soft, distant tone, painting a portrait of a resourceless soul, filled with shadows and solitude. The landlord shakes his head, stating that Yuki was always reclusive, preferring to keep to himself. As the words linger between them, Mika feels an ache of sympathy for the young man she never knew, her mind slipping into thoughts about what life must have been like for him. The only clue she finds is the jazz bar across the street, Blue Echo, where the landlord mentions Yuki would often spend his time lost in the music, his loneliness blending into the melodies that poured from the bar's doorway. With a mix of determination and curiosity coursing through her veins, Mika takes a deep breath and steps into Blue Echo, the neon lights flickering against the evening gloom and drawing her inside like a moth to a flame. The scent of aged wood and forgotten dreams fills the air, punctuated by the deep tones of a distant saxophone, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. It's here that she meets Kento Asano, the bar's owner and, as she soon learns, Yuki's estranged older brother. He leans casually against the bar, an air of charm surrounding him like a well-fitted suit, but there's a complexity in his eyes that gives him away, the battle between the past and the present evident on his face. Their initial interaction is tinged with tension. Kento's skepticism is palpable as he assesses her, dismissing her as merely a stranger encroaching on what he considers to be private family affairs. Mika, equally resistant to unnecessary entanglements whipped into a frenzy by Kento's challenging gaze, nearly walks away, feeling an urge to retreat into her ordered life. But when she mentions Yuki's belongings, a flicker of something, perhaps recognition or pain, crosses Kento's features, revealing a crack in his carefully constructed facade. He refuses to take the items, claiming that he and his brother hadn't spoken in years, the words heavy with unspoken histories and unresolved conflicts. Frustrated but intrigued, Mika leaves the bar, carrying the box tightly against her chest, the weight of Yuki's life and perhaps Kento's pressing down on her like a fog that refused to lift. That night, as the world outside her window turns silent, Mika finds herself unable to shake the encounter with Kento. She plays the cassette tape she retrieved from Yuki's belongings, the haunting melody of an unfinished piano composition spilling into her apartment, curling around her heart like smoke. Each note reverberates, capturing a depth of feeling she cannot comprehend, filling her space with an unexpected ache that resonates with the loneliness and yearning she sensed in both Yuki and Kento. As the music swirls around her, Mika begins to understand that her life, as meticulously organized as it may seem, is on the cusp of something she never anticipated, a journey that would unravel not just the threads of another person's existence but challenge the very fabric of her own heart. Determined to find out more about Yuki's life, Mika returns to Blue Echo, though she tells herself it's merely for closure. As she steps inside, the familiar scent of aged wood and rich coffee envelopes her, grounding her in a moment she never expected to relish. The bar hums with soft conversations and the faint clinking of glasses, but all her focus is on Kento, standing behind the counter with a casual grace that belies his turmoil. She watches him move, a flicker of melancholy seen through his laughter, as he engages effortlessly with the regulars, each smile a mask carefully crafted to hide vulnerability. The jazz melodies swirling around them, seamlessly weaving through the laughter and murmurs, create an echo not just of the present but of past dreams painted in melancholy tones. Mika can see that beneath Kento's charismatic exterior lies a solitude so profound it makes her heart ache, and she wonders how Yuki could have drifted from such a loving brother. As she takes a seat at the bar, her gaze drifts to a corner where Daichi Mori leans against the wall, his fingers tapping rhythmically on a tabletop. When their eyes meet, he offers her a welcoming smile, inviting her into a circle of warmth that she finds comforting yet foreign. There's a familiarity in his presence, and as they strike up a conversation, he inadvertently reveals scraps of Kento's past. Kento was something special in his early days, he says, his voice tinged with nostalgia. He had that fire in him, you know? The kind that lights up every room. Hearing this, Mika feels her determination solidify. She has to challenge Kento. It's undeniable that they both share a connection, a bond forged out of grief and the weight of unspoken words. However, when she approaches him again, her resolve is tested as she sees him in his element, a place where he feels he can control the narrative. With her heart racing, she confronts him about his indifference, questioning why he refuses to acknowledge his brother's passing. Kento's warm smile fades, replaced by a flicker of irritation that dances across his features. "You don't understand," he snaps, frustration lacing his voice. "It's easier to pretend it didn't happen than to face the truth." In that heated moment, Kento's barriers start to crumble as he reluctantly reveals fragments of his past, sharing how he and Yuki drifted apart, a brother torn away by dreams and family expectations, leaving a void filled only by regrets. "We had so much time," he says, his voice heavy with anguish. "I walked away from my own dreams, and now it feels too late." Caught off guard by his unexpected honesty, Mika finds her own wall slowly breaking down, and she responds by sharing her struggles with detachment, admitting how she's always chosen distance over emotional risk. "I understand that need," she confesses, her voice barely above a whisper, "but it keeps you from really living." Their conversation grows heated, filled with a blend of anger and understanding that pushes them closer together. As they argue, a fragile connection begins to form, born out of shared pain and a glimmer of empathy that neither of them saw coming. The music playing around them becomes a soft backdrop to their emotions, as each note seems to echo their struggles, longing, regret, unfulfilled dreams. Later that night, still processing the raw emotions stirred within her, Mika returns home. The box of Yuki's belongings sits on her table, a haunting reminder of a life both hidden and exposed. She reaches for the cassette again, a sense of yearning pulling her in. As the melody fills the silence of her apartment, she closes her eyes, allowing herself to be enveloped by the sound. As the haunting notes wash over her, she realizes with a growing ache that the melody is incomplete. Its yearning tones feel as if they are waiting for an ending that never came, much like the threads of their own tangled lives. As the days turned into weeks, Mika found herself drawn to Blue Echo more often than she anticipated, each visit igniting a flicker of warmth in the coldness that had settled in her heart. The small jazz bar, with its dimly lit corners and the sound of soft melodies swirling like smoke in the air, was an unexpected sanctuary where her structured world began to bend ever so slightly. Kento, with his easy smile that barely masked the shadows in his eyes, became more than just a stranger. He became an anchor, someone with whom she could share her fears and desires, even her guarded heart. Their interactions flourished, shifting from the cautious exchanges of two ships passing in the night to an intimacy that brushed against uncharted territories of vulnerability. He spoke of jazz with an enthusiasm that illuminated his features, sharing tales of late nights spent in smoky clubs, the thrill of composing melodies that danced in the air, filling the room with a pulse of life. As he reminisced, Mika listened intently, her mind picturing the vibrancy of the scenes as if she were living them herself. She could almost visualize the rhythm bouncing against the walls, each note a heartbeat that drew him back to the dreams he had long abandoned. In response, she found herself revealing parts of her own past, how she had chosen the safety of predictability over the messiness of emotions, how every decision was carefully crafted to sidestep any piece of vulnerability. "I guess I thought it was better to avoid complications," she admitted one evening, a hint of sadness lacing her words, as they leaned against the bar quietly sipping their drinks. With time, the bar evolved into a backdrop for their budding friendship, marked by serene moments enveloped in jazz and hushed laughter that seemed to linger in the air like the scents of the cigars smoked in the corners. One particularly evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon painting the sky in shades of lavender and orange, Kento turned on an old jazz record, the nostalgic crackle of vinyl filling the room with an enchanting aura. The soft, sultry notes wrapped around them like a warm embrace, instilling a sense of intimacy that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As they swayed together, caught in the music's rhythm, Mika felt the wall she had meticulously built around herself begin to tremble and crack, the sound of his laughter a delightful echo that stirred something long dormant within her. As she looked up at Kento, feeling the connection deepening with every shared note, all of her previous reservations threatened to dissipate. But amidst this burgeoning bond, she stumbled upon something unexpected: a weathered letter tucked deep within Yuki's notebook, a revelation that echoed with urgency. She recognized Kento's name scrawled in delicate handwriting, realizing it was addressed to him yet never sent, an unsealed message frozen in time. Curiosity and dread danced in her chest as she read the fragile words. They revealed Yuki's vulnerability, his longing to reach out, to bridge a chasm that had swallowed their relationship entirely. A sudden weight pressed down on Mika, filling her with uncertainty. Should she reveal this fragile piece of Yuki's heart to Kento? She paused, conflicted about the discovery. The truth could offer him the closure he desperately sought, but it could just as easily unravel the delicate fabric of their relationship, a risk that felt monumental after the distance they had finally traversed together. Torn between fostering a connection and the fear of reopening wounds, she hesitated, unsure if this revelation would be the balm for the past or a fresh wound. Unbeknownst to both, that fragile letter held the power to reshape not only their understanding of Yuki but the path of their own tangled hearts as well. The weight of Yuki's letter hung heavily in the air as Mika watched Kento grapple with its contents, her heart racing in anticipation. It was a moment she had both hoped for and dreaded, the truth laid bare. Kento's hands trembled slightly as he read the intimate words penned by a brother yearning for the connection they once shared. Each line mattered, revealing Yuki's unfulfilled desires, the way he longed to reach out but felt stifled by the walls of silence that had built up over the years. As Kento's face morphed from skepticism to raw vulnerability, an uncharacteristic crack in his composed exterior surprised Mika, making her feel the weight of the moment even more profoundly. Overwhelmed by emotion, Kento abruptly left the bar, the door swinging shut behind him, leaving Mika standing in a swirl of confusion and concern, her mind racing with thoughts of what this meant for them. Days turned into a blur as Kento buried himself in the bar's chaotic rhythm, drowning his heartache in too many drinks, his laughter lingering like a ghost in the dimly lit corners of Blue Echo. He was a shadow of the man Mika had come to know, his usually vibrant aura dimmed, replaced by a fog of regret and avoidance. Mika, burdened by the silence that stretched painfully between them, found herself caught in a chasm of longing and frustration. Reina saw the change and urged Mika to confront the silence rather than retreat into her comfort zone again. Though the thought of facing Kento after the rupture left her stomach tight, she understood she had to break the cycle of avoidance. The city's skyline greeted her like an old friend when she walked toward Blue Echo, the familiar sounds of jazz spilling into the night. Stepping inside, she felt the comforting embrace of music envelop her, the melodies swirling around the bar's warm wood accents and dim lighting. It was here that Kento found solace, even if he was trying to deny it. Mika sought him out, her heart pounding in her chest as she approached his usual spot at the bar, where he was seated, half-empty glass clutched tightly in his hand, eyes hauntingly distant. With determination coursing through her, she initiated a confrontation, heart pounding, voicing her frustration, needing to understand his withdrawal. Kento's defenses rose, and their heated argument filled the air, layered with emotion and the unarticulated fears that had kept them apart. Mika accused him of hiding behind his pain, of allowing it to dictate his actions even now, while Kento retaliated, suggesting her own fear of commitment was just another way to keep her heart guarded. The intensity of their words echoed through the bar, drawing the curious eyes of patrons, but neither cared in that moment. It was a release they deeply needed. Inside Kento, a tumult of emotion swirled, but amidst the storm of regret and longing, a singular clarity emerged. In a moment of recklessness and yearning, he made his way to the piano at the bar's corner, the weight of Yuki's unfinished piece pressing upon him like a palpable force. As he sat down, the keys seemed to hum under his touch, waiting for revival, and he hesitated just a moment, a deep breath escaping his lips before he began to play the incomplete melody that had haunted both of their dreams. The sound that filled the room was a raw, tender combination of sorrow and hope, echoing their shared journey of loss and connection. It was the music of an unfinished conversation, a plea for the bond that had almost slipped away, resonant with their fears and desires, each note a heartbeat that echoed both Yuki's farewell and the promise of new beginnings. Mika, standing in reverent silence, felt the walls around her heart soften as she listened, the sound weaving through her, inviting her to face her own fears. With every note Kento played, the air crackled with the potential of healing, and in that intimate setting, the space between them began to dissolve, replaced with understanding, vulnerability, and a newly forged connection. As Kento's fingers danced over the piano keys, a soft melody began to emerge, the gentle notes filling the air with a haunting beauty. Each stroke struck the strings of Mika's heart, resonating with the ache of longing that had both defined him and now entwined her own existence with his. It was a realization that struck them simultaneously. The notes reverberated with the silent conversations they had never had, echoing all the lost opportunities and neglected emotions that had woven a complex tapestry of regret and grief. Mika found herself enraptured, her heart racing as she absorbed the poignant melody, each note acting as an unspoken vow, a whisper from Yuki that beckoned them closer together, urging Kento to confront the shadows of his past while simultaneously inviting her into the intricate layers of his once closed heart. She observed Kento's expression, the deep furrow of his brow slowly softening as he succumbed to the memory of what had been, and perhaps what could still be, if only they were brave enough to grasp it. She felt a warmth unfurl in her chest, a flicker of hope amidst the sorrow that had shrouded them both, and as tears began to form in her eyes, Mika realized that this moment transcended mere grief. It was the first step toward healing, toward creating an uncharted narrative stitched from both their heartaches. This shared silence filled with music wrapped around them like a protective cocoon, a sacred space where they could both confront their struggles without the weight of judgment. The final chord hung in the air like a held breath, both lingering and satisfying, their shared gaze heavy with unvoiced revelations. Amidst the quiet, something monumental shifted, a magnetic pull drawing them into each other's orbit, a realization that the boundaries they had carefully constructed were beginning to crumble. Kento's eyes glimmered with an intensity that sent shivers through Mika's spine, and she could feel the atmosphere thickening around them, charged with an energy that hinted at the possibilities that lay uncharted before them. He leaned closer, the scent of the aged wood of the piano mingling with the faintistic notes of aftershave lingering on his skin, a pleasant reminder that he was still there, real and present, just a breath away. In this tentative space defined by vulnerability and longing, Kento hesitated as if to weigh his newfound emotions, before tilting his head slightly, closing the gap between them with a deliberate slowness that heightened her anticipation. Mika's breath caught in her throat, her heart racing wildly as she surrendered to the moment, allowing the rhythm of their past to guide them toward the warmth of an uncertain future. Then, as if time stood still, their lips met in a cautious yet fervent kiss, sending sparks racing through their veins as they crossed an unseen threshold. It was a hesitant union and exploration of uncharted emotions that was both sweet and poignant, filled with the weight of all the silences that existed between them, and the undeniable ache of dreams deferred. Kento's hand found its place gently on her cheek, a tender touch that spoke volumes more than words ever could. She leaned into his palm, warmth pulsating from the point of contact that ignited something within her, a flicker of affection that began to bloom, wrapping around her heart like vines reaching for the sun. The kiss deepened, no longer just a reconciling of shared grief, but the first binding of their hearts, entwining past regrets with present desires, ushering them into a future that felt suddenly alive with promise. As they parted, breathless and wide-eyed, the air around them simmered with unbroken potential, the world outside the closeness of their embrace fading, leaving only the comforting presence of each other's heartbeat as a reminder that occasionally, amidst life's chaos, one could find a connection that felt inherently right. The night held its breath, and for the first time, in the midst of loss, they discovered the exquisite beauty of vulnerability and the quiet bravery of opening oneself to another, hinting at the transformative journey that lay ahead. The night after their first kiss, a silence hung in the air between Mika and Kento, woven thickly with unspoken words and uncertainties. It was a delicate balance of hope and fear, a space where attraction flickered like a candle caught between gusts, both avoiding the weight of their emotions while each felt an undeniable pull toward the other. Mika found herself submerged in introspection, her mind racing to explain away what had transpired. She convinced herself that the kiss, born from a crescendo of emotions, was merely a fleeting moment, a spontaneous reaction to the grief they both carried. She had built her life around predictability, and this sudden shift felt like stepping off a precipice without knowing where the ground lay beneath. Kento, meanwhile, masked his own confusion with a cloak of nonchalance. He felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread, unsure of allowing the chaotic swirl of feelings to upset the fragile order he'd constructed in his life after his brother's death. Instead of drawing closer, they wandered cautiously along the edges, reconsidering their own vulnerabilities while savoring the growing intimacy that made their hearts race with a peculiar blend of joy and apprehension. Mika's visits to Blue Echo became increasingly frequent, each time buoyed not just by the intention of seeing Kento but drawn by the warmth of the bar itself, the lively chatter of patrons, and the soulful melodies that enveloped her like a cocoon. She often found solace in the dimly lit corners, the scent of aged wood and the bittersweet aroma of coffee and alcohol filling her senses. Conversations flowed with Daichi and the regulars, laughter mingling with the notes of jazz floating through the air, slowly dissolving the walls she had meticulously built around her heart. Kento, on the other hand, remained enigmatic, caught in his own world of conflicting emotions. He played at the bar one evening, surprising everyone including Mika by taking to the piano in front of a live audience, something he had avoided for years. The moment he struck the keys, the haunting melody that spilled forth was raw and unfinished, echoing the void left by Yuki's absence. Each note resonated with longing and loss, telling a story of heartbreak that Mika could feel in her bones. She could see the flicker of vulnerability behind his confident facade as he poured his soul into the music, and in that moment, it was as if Kento was finally allowing Yuki's spirit to speak through him. Once the performance concluded, Kento stepped away from the piano, still tethered to the weight of his emotions. The rooftop was their haven that night, the vast city sprawling below under a blanket of stars, their glow offering an ethereal backdrop to the complexity of their feelings. The air was crisp and tasted faintly of the sea, carrying with it the distant sounds of life that thrummed warmly below them. Mika stood beside Kento, the cool breeze caressing her cheeks and the silence stretched comfortably between them. It was in this serene sanctuary that Kento finally broke the stillness, his voice low and laden with curiosity as he dared to delve deeper into their shared anguish. He asked her why she hadn't simply walked away after returning Yuki's belongings. The question floated between them, heavy with implications. Mika struggled with the answer. It was complicated. Her heart gravitated toward him, propelled by a force she barely understood. She finally admitted that something about their connection, about him, felt incomplete, an echo of an unfinished melody that mirrored what they both sought but had yet to articulate. Kento absorbed her words, studying her intently, as if attempting to decipher a language that was spoken only through glances and subtle gestures. Then, almost as if searching for clarity himself, he murmured softly, "Maybe I don't want it to be." In that moment, the uncertainty that had dwelled between them shifted into something tangible, rich with possibility and fear. It was a leap into the unknown, and as they stood there, surrounded by the expansive night sky, the promise of love danced just out of reach, filled with the need to confront their pasts and forge an uncertain path toward a future they hadn't dared to imagine yet. It was a moment suspended in time, the world falling away as they stepped closer to each other, ready to navigate the intricacies of their hearts and the ghosts that lingered between them, aware that healing and connection sometimes meant risking everything, and for the first time, they were both ready to take that chance. As their bond deepened, the nights at Blue Echo became a sanctuary for Mika and Kento, a place where laughter mingled with the soulful notes of jazz, creating an atmosphere thick with unspoken emotions. Mika found herself sharing pieces of her life that had long been tucked away behind the walls she had erected, revealing childhood memories that were tinged with bittersweet nostalgia. She described the suffocating loneliness of her past, how it shaped her into a meticulous creature of habit who sought comfort in predictability. The way she paused while recounting her fears made Kento ache. He could see the shadows of her history flicker behind her warm brown eyes, and though his instinct was to retreat, he leaned in instead. He told her about the moment he had walked away from his dreams, how the beats of his heart had abandoned the rhythm of jazz after the fallout with his family. Each note he played was a reminder of lost connections, and the weight of his regrets hung heavy in the air as they opened up to each other against the backdrop of hushed narratives that the bar intertwined within its very walls. But despite these heartfelt exchanges, the undercurrents of fear shifted like a storm gathering on the horizon. One evening, as the twilight painted the sky in shades of deep blue and velvety purple, Mika received an unexpected call that sent her heart racing. A prestigious design firm had offered her a career-making opportunity in a city far away, a chance she had once dreamed of but never imagined would come to fruition so soon. She felt a familiar knot in her stomach, torn between ambition and the burgeoning feelings she held for Kento. What would leaving mean for them? The uncertainty of a new path loomed ominously, and she couldn't shake the idea that following her dreams might mean losing the fragile connection she had built with the man who brought music back into her life. She hesitated to share the news, afraid that it would fracture the trust they were still delicately building, unsure if she was ready to confront the weight of choice looming over both of them. Unbeknownst to her, Kento was grappling with his demons as well. Just days later, after performing a hauntingly beautiful rendition of the incomplete melody that haunted his heart, an old music producer had approached him, intrigued by the magic he had conjured on the keys. With every note, Kento could feel the spark of his former self flicker back to life, the ardor he once had for jazz rekindled in the glow of the audience's appreciation. Yet, despite the opportunity that lay before him, the memory of Yuki's unresolved legacy loomed larger than any unfinished song, a reminder of the bond he had lost and the brother he had neglected. The rift between pursuing his passion and confronting the pain of the past echoed loudly in his mind, and as each day passed, he couldn't shake the worry that if he embraced this chance, it might pull him farther away from the connection he cherished with Mika. Would the hopes of finally claiming what was rightfully his send him reeling back into the past, or could it forge a new path together alongside her? As they both wrestled with their choices, their encounters grew laced with tension, both aware of the ungraspable truths that hung between them. Each sweet moment was tinged with the bitter edge of uncertainty. Laughter felt too fleeting, silences too heavy. Mika would catch Kento's eye while he played, her heart swelling only to feel the inevitable weight of what they both stood to lose. Kento, in turn, could see the subtle shifts in her demeanor, an unshakable blend of hope and fear coloring her expressions. The nights at the bar became more electric, as if the world outside held its breath, urging them to face the choices that lay before them. As they stood on the brink of their new paths, with promises of growth shimmering just out of reach, the question that haunted them both lingered: could they chase their dreams while still holding on to the love they had begun to nurture, or would their past fears ultimately weave a tapestry that pushed them irrevocably apart? It was a heart-wrenching standoff, with both dangerous and exhilarating possibilities dancing in the shadows, waiting to unveil their fates. The unspoken tension between Mika and Kento had been simmering for days, each stolen glance and unintentional brush of hands carrying the weight of unsaid words. It all came crashing down one fateful afternoon when Kento walked into Blue Echo and felt the sting of betrayal slice through him like a sharp, cold blade. There it was, in Reina's casual tone, the mention of Mika's job offer, a high-profile design position in another city, meant to take her away from him. His heart raced with disbelief as the words echoed in his mind. She had kept this from him. Kento felt the room spin slightly, the familiar scent of aged whiskey and jazz lingering in the air suddenly feeling suffocating. How could she not confide in him? The trust they had built felt fragile, ready to shatter with a single misstep. Hours later, when Mika arrived at the bar, he was ready, the simmering hurt ready to bubble over. As she stepped inside, an unspoken recognition passed between them, the laughter from the previous nights replaced by a heavy silence. Kento stood behind the bar, arms crossed, his brow knitted in frustration as he faced her. Mika, sensing the storm, quietly approached, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. She had come to discuss the belongings, to confront the future, and yet all she could see was the distance that had crept in between them, a chasm filled with misunderstanding and fear. Their argument ignited quickly, alive with pent-up emotions clawing to be freed. She claimed he was holding on to his regrets like a crutch, refusing to step into the light while clinging to the shadows of his past. Kento countered with equal intensity, pointing out her inability to truly let anyone in, her predictable walls a fortress that even love struggled to breach. Dark clouds gathered in the bar, distant echoes of saxophones playing their sorrows as emotions spiraled into a whirlwind of accusations. Rage and hurt poured out in the form of words, their voices rising above the music. Mika felt tears prick her eyes, the truth in Kento's words landing heavy on her chest. She had buried herself in work to avoid addressing the cracks in her heart, and now, facing Kento felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, terrified of the drop. In her desperation, she decided to leave, believing, perhaps mistakenly, that solitude was her only refuge. Kento watched her, heart aching, feeling each word tug his insides tighter. As she turned to walk away, he swallowed hard, a knot in his throat. The finality of her decision hung in the air, unyielding and heavy. Days passed, filled with a profound silence where laughter used to live. Kento found himself wandering through his empty bar, haunted by memories of laughter and shared warmth, now replaced by a chilling emptiness. He drowned his sorrow in whiskey, the amber liquid a temporary balm for his fraying spirit, but it did little to ease the growing void within him. Yuki's old notebook lay open on the piano, the unfinished melody silently mocking him. The ink's promise of words unspoken filled the air with a weight that sneaked in when he was least expecting it. Kento avoided it, pushing away thoughts of Mika, clinging to the regret like an old friend. Yet, as he sat there, lost in a haze of solitude, Daichi arrived, his steady demeanor cutting through Kento's self-imposed isolation. Daichi looked at Kento with disappointment masked in concern, reminding him that Mika had not simply brought Yuki's belongings but had also reignited a part of him long buried under layers of neglect and sorrow. He said that she had breathed life back into the dreams he abandoned, giving him a glimpse of hope he had thought lost to time. Kento, heart racing, finally turned to Yuki's cassette, the haunting notes of an ending never found echoing in his mind. He replayed it, letting the melody wash over him like a warm wave, drowning out the confusion and heartbreak as pieces of clarity began to surface. In a moment of clarity, Kento felt the raw urge to reclaim what had slipped through his fingers. He wiped away his doubts and, driven by a yearning to confront his fears, sat at the piano. With trembling fingers, he began to play the incomplete melody that had haunted him since Mika's departure. The notes poured out, resonating with unspoken regrets and buried feelings, transforming the bar into a sanctuary of healing. Every chord resonated with a love left unconfessed, a longing that pierced through the shadows that had enveloped him. It was as if Yuki was beckoning him to finish what had been started, to find closure where none had existed. As he played, Kento found himself enveloped in the spirit of his brother, the music becoming a bridge connecting his past to the present. It flowed over him, washing away remnants of despair and igniting a fire deep within a fire fueled by love, loss, and hope. He played until dawn, the rising sun spilling golden light through the windows of blue echo, marking the end of his solitude. Each note whispered the promise of a new beginning, urging him to reach out, to fight for what he had come to realize was worth the risk. With a determined heart, he resolved that he wouldn't let Mika walk away without a chance to finally speak the truth he had kept locked within. As Kento's fingers danced over the piano keys, the room held its breath in a reverent silence, each note pulsing with emotion, weaving together the threads of history, heartache, and newfound hope. The melody oscillated between sorrow and joy, embodying everything Yuki had struggled to express in life and the burgeoning love that had emerged from tragedy between Kento and Mika. The vibrant hues of the jazz bar seemed to fade into the background, leaving only the music's poignant echoes hanging in the air, wrapping around Mika like a warm embrace. She felt the weight of Kento's confession fill the room, drawing her closer to him, even if he was miles away at that very moment on stage. People swayed gently, lost in their stories and feelings as the song enveloped them, each person touched by the haunting beauty resonating from the heart of the man they all once considered lost. Amidst the crescendo, Mika caught Kento's gaze, and time stood still. The distance that once felt insurmountable evaporated, and in his eyes, she recognized a reflection of her own longing, a mutual understanding of dreams and fears laid bare. As the final notes hung suspended, notes of love and loss intertwined, the audience erupted into a thunderous applause that shook the very walls of blue echo. Kento stood, overwhelmed yet radiant, bathed in the incandescent glow of the moment he had created, a moment that belonged not only to him but to them both. He scanned the crowd until his eyes found hers again. The look they shared spoke volumes, a conversation centuries in the making. Outside, the world continued as it always had, but inside these four walls, something monumental had shifted. Mika felt her spirit soar, realizing that the music was just the beginning. The song had illustrated their journey thus far and crafted a bridge to a future that held endless possibilities. The softness of love intertwined with the sharpness of their pasts, and she knew that the work ahead would be complicated. But the flame of hope ignited within her, incandescent against the shadows that had once loomed large. The last notes drifted off into a lingering silence, marking the end of one chapter while the pen hovered, ready to inscribe the next. As the crowd cheered and clapped, Kento moved toward her, his eyes alight with a fire that symbolized not just what had been lost, but what could flourish anew, a garden of healing ready to bloom. Just as he stepped off the stage, a newcomer entered the bar, a presence both striking and enigmatic, shaking Mika to her core as their eyes locked with a spark of familiarity that sent shivers down her spine. Kento, oblivious to the new arrival, was quickly making his way through the throng to reach her. Unbeknownst to them, the arrival carried the weight of new secrets, potential rivalries, and a past intertwined in ways they had yet to comprehend. As laughter and music echoed in the backdrop, and Kento reached out for her hand, Mika felt her heart race with the thrill of the unknown, that dangerous yet exhilarating query into what tomorrow might hold. The scene vibrated with anticipation, a whirlwind of possibilities lingering in the air, leaving her breathless at the thought of the next twist awaiting them just around the corner. Amidst the warmth of blue echo, light flickered and shadows danced, while the stage had been set not just to play a soulful tune, but to engage in the grand, chaotic, and sometimes unpredictable symphony of life and love that was yet to fully unfold. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe to Happiness of Love. That way, you won't miss any of our heartfelt romances. See you in the next love story.